North Korea's oldest fighter opens fire on America's most advanced helicopter. August 14, 2025. The skies over the Yellow Sea are ablaze. A North Korean Mi-24 Hind helicopter, a 14-ton Soviet relic, opens fire with its 23mm cannon, firing hundreds of rounds at an American AH-64E Apache Guardian. Sparks fly as the shells hit the Apache's armor, but the American helicopter remains undeterred. This is no ordinary encounter. One side carries outdated 1980s weapons, the other a $36 million flying fortress built to survive the most brutal battlefields. In that moment, the balance of power becomes painfully clear. Hin's desperate aggression sparked a confrontation that lasted less than an hour, ending with a destroyed helicopter, a crippled submarine, and a humiliation Pyongyang would never forget. What would happen if North Korea fired first? And how would the United States fire back? Whose helicopter would be destroyed? Join me as I find out the truth. 3:10 p.m., August 14, 2025. The Yellow Sea, 70 nautical miles off the coast of North Korea. What looked like a calm afternoon was in fact the beginning of a military disaster. Beneath the waves, a Sang-2 diesel-electric submarine of North Korea was suffocating. It had been submerged for 48 straight hours, its batteries drained to less than 12% capacity. Like a man holding his breath too long, it had no choice but to surface. And the moment it did, the United States was waiting. Hovering high above was an AH-64E Apache Guardian, America's legendary attack helicopter. Each Apache costs more than $36 million, weighs 11 tons, and carries an arsenal of 16 Hellfire missiles, 76 rockets, and a 30mm chain gun capable of firing 625 rounds per minute. Normally designed to shred tanks on land, this machine had been refitted with advanced sensors to hunt submarines. Its powerful communication suite linked directly with the USS Roosevelt, an R. Lee Burke-class destroyer bristling with 90 vertical launch missile cells just 40 nautical miles away. The numbers were staggering. A diesel submarine like the Sang-2 produces acoustic signatures of over 120 decibels when forced to surface and recharge, loud enough to be detected across half the sea. For North Korea, surfacing should have been routine maintenance. But with an Apache circling overhead, every sound became a death sentence. In that instant, the battlefield was no longer equal. One side had the world's most advanced rotary wing war machine linked to a $2 billion naval destroyer. The other had an aging submarine whose design dated back to the 1990s. From the moment the Sang-2's conning tower broke the surface, the trap was already sprung. North Korea had walked blindly into America's silent net. Do you think the North Korean submarine would dare to launch a missile at a US aircraft? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Now let me see how North Korea reacts. North Korea's answer came quickly. At 3:22 p.m., less than 15 minutes after the Sang-2 surfaced, radar picked up a fast-moving contact from the east. Pyongyang had scrambled one of its so-called Pride of the Air fleet, a Mi-24 Hind, a relic imported from Russia in the 1980s. What the regime still called an attack helicopter was in reality a 14-ton flying museum piece, carrying outdated weapons and avionics nearly 40 years old. The orders to the pilot were simple: force the Americans away. To the brass in Pyongyang, it was theater. To the pilot, it was a mission of national honor. But to the men aboard the AH-64 Apache, it was nothing more than a nuisance. The Hind dove across the Apache's nose at barely 1,600 feet altitude, firing off flares in a crude display of aggression. The radio crackled with a warning in heavily accented English: "American aircraft, leave area immediately." There was one fatal problem. Both helicopters were still 50 nautical miles inside international waters. The Apache crew knew they were legally untouchable, and militarily untouchable in every other sense. Then came the devastating blunder. In response to the intimidation, the Apache lowered its dipping sonar directly into the sea, sending a crystal-clear message: "We still have your submarine." You don't intimidate America with noise and flares. All you do is expose your weakness. General Alexis G. Grinkowicz, U.S. European Command. Panic erupted below. The Sang-2's captain, realizing his position had not only been detected but actively tracked, ordered an emergency dive. The submarine dropped at a dangerous rate of more than 15 meters per second. Cavitation bubbles roared off the propellers, and the pressure hull groaned under the sudden depth change. The noise reached 130 decibels, loud enough for the entire U.S. carrier strike group to hear. Instead of saving the submarine, the Hind had signed its death warrant. In trying to intimidate the world's most advanced military, North Korea had handed it priceless intelligence and blown its own cover wide open. What was meant to be a show of strength was, in reality, a public humiliation unfolding in real time. The surprise was coming before you know it. Support us by liking and subscribing to the channel. Now come with me to witness the stubbornness of North Korea. At 3:36 p.m., the fragile balance shattered. Convinced that the Americans would never dare to retaliate, the North Korean pilot pulled the trigger. A burst of 23mm cannon fire, nearly 400 rounds per minute, ripped through the sky toward the Apache. The Mi-24 Hind was designed to terrify unarmored vehicles and infantry, but against the AH-64E's titanium composite armor, rated to withstand hits up to 23mm, the attack was little more than fireworks. Shells sparked and ricocheted harmlessly off the Apache's side panels. The Apache's gunner barely flinched. Years of training and the confidence of flying a machine built to survive frontline combat meant this was just another day in the office. Yet, to the North Korean pilot, the lack of effect triggered panic and rage. He yanked the Hind into a banking turn, locked his radar onto the Apache for a second engagement, and armed his aging Igla-V air-to-air missile, a weapon with an effective range of barely 3 miles. Inside the Apache cockpit, alarm screamed. The crew immediately prepared to retaliate with 2 AIM-92 Stinger missiles, each capable of reaching speeds of Mach 2.2 and slamming into targets with devastating precision. The American pilot squeezed the trigger, but nothing happened. The launch button jammed. The missiles sat inert on their rails. For an agonizing 6 seconds, the Apache was a sitting duck. Across the sky, the Hind's missile seeker found its tone. The North Korean pilot grinned. He had his lock. One more button press and the world's most feared attack helicopter would be engulfed in flames. And then, fate turned. The Apache's firing system suddenly cleared. With a deafening roar, 2 Stingers streaked off the rails at over 1,500 miles per hour. In less than 4 seconds, they closed the gap. The Hind pilot tried to break away, pulling nearly 4.5 Gs, but the airframe shuddered on the edge of collapse. He had no chance. The first Stinger punched through the Hind's left engine, detonating in a fireball visible for 20 miles. The second missile struck half a second later, tearing the fuselage apart. The Mi-24 exploded mid-air, its wreckage scattering across the waves of the Yellow Sea. In under a minute, the imbalance of power was absolute. A Cold War relic had tried to challenge America's most modern attack helicopter, and paid the price in flames. The sky was clear once again, but the battle was far from over. Below the waves, the Sang-O 2 submarine was still thrashing in desperation, and the U.S. Navy was preparing its next move. What was about to happen terrified North Korea. The fiery explosion of the Mi-24 Hind still burned in the sky when the battle shifted downward. At 3:44 p.m., the U.S. Navy moved with clinical precision. From the deck of the USS Roosevelt, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer bristling with 9,200 tons of steel and 90 missile launch cells, a MH-60R Seahawk, call sign Romeo, lifted into the air. Unlike the Apache, Romeo was built for this exact moment, submarine hunting. Within minutes, the Seahawk's rotor wash whipped the waves as its crew deployed a dipping sonar capable of scanning to depths over 1,500 feet. The echoes returned fast. The Sang-O 2 submarine was attempting frantic evasive maneuvers. Its captain ordered crash turns at angles so steep that stress cracks echoed through the hull. But every maneuver created more noise. The American sonar operators smiled. The sub was practically broadcasting its own obituary. Then came the hammer. From just 2,800 feet altitude, the Romeo crew released a Mk-54 lightweight torpedo, a weapon packing a 96-pound high-explosive warhead. Traveling at over 40 knots, the torpedo homed in on the submarine's cavitation trail like a bloodhound on scent. To add pressure, the destroyer itself launched a RUM-139 VLASROC, an anti-submarine rocket capable of striking targets more than 12 miles away. The Sang-O 2 had no escape. At 3:57 p.m., the Mk-54 detonated against the submarine's aft section. The shockwave rattled the hull, sending bulkheads shuddering and knocking crewmen off their feet. Water began flooding 2 compartments. Emergency alarms blared. For a diesel-electric sub with a displacement of only 370 tons, even a partial hit was catastrophic. Yet the submarine clung to life. Though crippled, it managed to level off and limp deeper into the Yellow Sea. The captain had no choice but to abort his mission and head for the nearest base at Nampo. Above the waves, the Americans had once again demonstrated overwhelming dominance. In less than 30 minutes, one Apache, one Seahawk, and one destroyer had destroyed a helicopter, crippled a submarine, and collected enough acoustic and electronic data to rewrite the playbook of North Korean naval warfare. The message was unmistakable. In the 21st century, challenging the US Navy and Army in their own element was not bravery, it was suicide. By 4:15 p.m., the battlefield had fallen silent. Smoke from the destroyed Mi-24 Hind drifted across the waves, while beneath the surface the Sang-O-2 submarine limped towards safety. Damage reports later confirmed the strike had ruptured fuel lines, flooded 2 compartments, and reduced propulsion to less than 40% capacity. What was once North Korea's silent hunter was now a crippled steel coffin forced to crawl home. The cost of this failure was staggering. A single Sang-O-2 submarine takes nearly 7 years to build and costs Pyongyang an estimated $300 million, more than the annual food budget for 3 million of its citizens. And yet, in less than 30 minutes, one Apache helicopter and one Seahawk had rendered it combat ineffective. For North Korea's air wing, the humiliation was even worse. The Mi-24 Hind, once marketed by the regime as a flying tank, had been obliterated by 2 $38,000 Stinger missiles. Weapons so common in the US arsenal that thousands are stockpiled worldwide. The comparison was brutal. A $12 million helicopter destroyed in seconds by missiles that cost less than a luxury SUV. Strategically, the implications rippled far beyond the Yellow Sea. The US Navy had gained 72 minutes of uninterrupted acoustic and electronic data from both the Hind and the submarine. Engineers now knew exactly which frequencies to jam, which heat signatures to track, and which weak points to target. In one engagement, an entire generation of North Korean tactics had been compromised. The contrast could not have been clearer. On one side stood American technology, an Apache capable of surviving 23mm cannon fire, a Seahawk armed with torpedoes and rockets, and a destroyer with radar systems able to scan hundreds of miles. On the other stood North Korea, outdated aircraft, noisy submarines, and a pilot whose recklessness nearly handed the US Navy a live-fire training exercise. By the time the Sang-O-2 limped back to Nampo Naval Base under escort, the damage was already done. A relic of the Cold War had collided head-on with the cutting edge of American power, and lost. The lesson was unmistakable. Against US precision, resilience, and overwhelming firepower, intimidation is nothing more than self-destruction. In the span of less than 1 hour, the clash over the Yellow Sea revealed a truth that cannot be ignored. North Korea had sent its best, a Sang-O-2 submarine and a Mi-24 Hind helicopter, to intimidate the United States. Instead, it exposed its greatest weaknesses. A submarine valued at $300 million was crippled, a helicopter worth $12 million was reduced to flaming wreckage, and priceless tactical data was handed directly into American hands. The imbalance was overwhelming. An AH-64 Apache designed to fight tanks shrugged off cannon fire and unleashed Stinger missiles at Mach 2.2. A MH-60R Seahawk dropped torpedoes with surgical precision, crippling a submarine in seconds. And a US destroyer stood ready with 90 missile launch cells, each capable of obliterating threats far beyond the horizon. Against this, North Korea's so-called strength proved to be little more than noise, panic, and failure. But beyond the numbers lies the deeper lesson. In modern warfare, arrogance and outdated technology are fatal. The North Korean pilot believed he could frighten the world's most advanced military. Instead, his actions doomed his own forces and handed the US Navy a decisive victory without a single loss. For America, the message is clear. Investment in training, technology, and resilience pays off in moments when the world is watching. For adversaries, the warning is equally clear. Intimidation and recklessness only accelerate defeat. This was not just a battle in the sky and sea. It was a demonstration of what happens when raw aggression collides with discipline and modern power. If you value this kind of analysis and want to keep uncovering the real lessons behind today's conflicts, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us continue bringing you the untold stories of modern warfare.